Keanu Reeves was sitting in a McDonald's in Los Angeles, enjoying a rare moment of peace. The bustling city outside seemed far away as he took a break from the spotlight, savoring a simple meal after a busy charity event. But then, something unexpected happened that would change the course of his day, and maybe even his life. A young boy, no older than 5, approached him cautiously. He was clutching a broken toy car, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. The boy leaned in and whispered something into Keanu's ear. At that moment, Keanu's face went pale, and without hesitation, he dialed 911. What happened next was something that would touch everyone who hears the story. But before we dive into the rest of this incredible tale, we want to know where you're watching from. If you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow we've got another special one just for you. It was a typical sunny afternoon in LA, the sky a perfect shade of blue, dotted with only a few wisps of cloud. Keanu had just spent hours at a charity event, doing what he loved most, helping children in need. Exhausted but smiling, he could have easily chosen to head home or dine at a fancy restaurant. But today, Keanu decided to do something different. He stopped at a McDonald's on a busy avenue, seeking a moment of simplicity, away from the flashing lights and constant media attention. Inside, the restaurant was bustling with families and children, laughter filling the air as orders were called out and the smell of fries wafted through the space. Keanu, dressed casually in a black t-shirt and sunglasses, ordered his food and quietly found a corner to relax. With his phone off, he allowed himself to enjoy the rare peace that these moments offered. As he ate, Keanu noticed a little boy sitting at a nearby table, his eyes never leaving him. The boy, with messy blonde hair and wearing a faded blue shirt, held a broken toy car like it was his most prized possession. Keanu smiled at the sight, but didn't think much more of it. Yet, the boy kept staring, as though trying to gather the courage to do something. Seated next to the boy was a man, tall and impeccably dressed in a suit, sitting stiffly with a cold, disapproving expression. Every small movement the boy made seemed to irritate him, and Keanu could feel the tension in the air. The contrast between the boy's vulnerability and the man's rigid authority was striking. After what seemed like an eternity, the boy made a move. Clutching his toy car tightly, he stood up and, still watching Keanu, slowly walked in his direction. The entire restaurant seemed to quiet down as the boy approached. When he reached Keanu's table, the actor set down his burger, giving the boy his full attention. The boy's eyes held something Keanu couldn't quite place, a mixture of fear, determination, and hope. Trembling slightly, the boy leaned in and whispered something so quietly that Keanu had to lean in close to hear it. Before Keanu could react, the man at the nearby table noticed the boy was missing. His eyes locked onto Keanu's with a gaze that sent a chill down the actor's spine. The man stood up, adjusting his suit jacket, and slowly walked toward them. Keanu remained calm, but he could feel the shift in the air. Whatever was happening, it was far more serious than he initially thought. The restaurant, once filled with the hum of normalcy, suddenly felt distant. The world outside seemed to blur as Keanu focused solely on the boy, Ethan, who stood before him. The boy's urgency was palpable, and Keanu couldn't ignore it. Clutching his broken toy car to his chest, Ethan glanced over his shoulder, casting a brief look at the man now approaching them. Keanu realized he was caught in something far bigger than a chance encounter. What could this boy possibly want, and why was he so desperate for Keanu's attention? The answer would soon unfold, and it would move everyone involved in ways they couldn't have predicted. Was to protect Ethan and get him out of harm's way. Keanu's mind raced as he processed the boy's words. He did something bad to my mom, Ethan had whispered, and every instinct in Keanu's body told him this was far more serious than a simple family dispute. The situation had just escalated into something dangerous, and Keanu knew he had to act fast. For a brief moment, Keanu's gaze flickered back to Harris, who was now sitting at the table, his eyes locked on them with an intense, cold glare. The phone in Harris's hand seemed to serve as a silent threat, and Keanu could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. The man was no longer hiding his irritation. It was clear he was growing increasingly desperate to control the situation. Keanu didn't break eye contact with Harris, but slowly crouched down again, his voice gentle, yet firm. "Ethan, you're safe here. I'm not going to let anything happen to you." He kept his words calm, trying to create a sense of security for the boy. Every fiber of Keanu's being was focused on Ethan, and the actor's usual calm demeanor was now a shield protecting the child from whatever lay beyond the table. Ethan clutched his broken toy car tighter, his small hand shaking. The toy seemed to be his only anchor in a world where everything else was slipping away from him. "Can I stay here, please?" he whispered again, the desperation in his voice unmistakable. Harris, now visibly irritated, stood up abruptly and started walking toward them. His attempt at civility was fading fast. "Look, I appreciate what you're doing, but I really need to get going," he said through gritted teeth, a forced smile plastered on his face. He reached out as if to grab Ethan by the arm, but Keanu was already positioned between them, his stance firm and protective. Before Harris could make another move, Keanu placed a hand gently but firmly on his shoulder, stopping him. "Commitments can wait," Keanu said, his tone unwavering. "I think Ethan needs a moment." He seemed eager to talk about his toy car. "Let's get that sorted out first." The waitress, who had been watching the tension unfold from a distance, stepped in at just the right moment. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her eyes narrowing at Harris as she placed a tray down on a nearby table. Keanu kept his calm, smiling at her. "It's fine. Actually, could you bring Ethan something to drink? He looks like he could use a little break." The waitress nodded, though she gave Harris a suspicious glance before turning away. Keanu quickly reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone and typing a message to a trusted contact, alerting them to the situation. He didn't have much time. His gut told him that things were about to get much more dangerous. Harris had noticed the movement, and with a sharp step forward, the man's voice dropped lower, his words turning more menacing. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this has gone far enough." Keanu's expression didn't change, but his mind was already working quickly. The message was sent. Help was on the way. But would they make it in time? "I'm just trying to help," Keanu said calmly, his voice steady despite the tension. "It seems like this boy needs someone to listen. I'm sure you can understand that, right?" Harris's patience finally snapped. "I suggest you don't meddle where you're not wanted," he sneered, his voice low and threatening. Ethan, still clutching his broken toy car like a lifeline, stepped even closer to Keanu. His trembling voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the tension in the room like a knife. "He did something bad to my mom. Can you help?" Keanu's heart stopped. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a sad story. It was a desperate cry for help. The boy wasn't just trying to escape a bad situation, he was asking for protection, for someone to step in and save him. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't need to ask more questions. He could see the fear in Ethan's eyes and knew the urgency of the moment. It wasn't the time for anything more than action. He looked back at Harris, now sensing the full weight of the danger in the situation. Whatever game Harris was playing, Keanu knew it was no longer just about protecting a boy. It was about preventing something far worse from happening. The weight of the moment hung in the air as Keanu stood guard over Ethan. Time was running out. Harris might be a threat, but Keanu wasn't going to back down. Whatever it took, he was going to keep this boy safe. "Voice, I want to stay." Keanu could see the relief wash over Ethan's face, though it was clear the boy was still deeply frightened. The grip on his broken toy cars tightened again, a small, fragile shield against the world around him. Keanu could feel the weight of the moment, the tension hanging thick in the air. He wasn't just protecting Ethan physically, he was protecting his trust, his safety, and his right to be heard. Harris, however, didn't seem to take the answer well. His eyes narrowed, and his jaw tightened. "Really?" he sneered, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "You'd rather stay with a stranger than come with me?" His tone was sharp, trying to manipulate the situation, to undermine Keanu's presence. Keanu stood firm, his voice steady but his words carrying weight. He wants to stay, Harris. And I'm not going to let you take him until I understand what's going on here. Whatever you think you can control, it's not happening today. Harris's face turned a shade darker, and he stood up again, his posture brimming with authority. But Keanu didn't flinch. The actor's calmness was more powerful than any show of force Harris could muster. Harris took a deep breath, his fists clenched by his sides. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Mr. Reeves," he said through gritted teeth, his voice now a low growl. "This is far beyond your comprehension. You're making a mistake." Keanu didn't respond. He didn't need to. Every part of his being was focused on protecting Ethan, on keeping him safe. His gaze locked on Harris, unyielding, but he kept his tone calm and even. "You're not taking him," he repeated, a promise that couldn't be broken. Ethan, still clutching his toy car, looked at Keanu, his eyes wide with fear, but there was a flicker of hope there too. The boy's voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you." Keanu gave him a small nod, keeping his attention on Harris. "I won't let him down," he said, as much to Ethan as to Harris. The silence was deafening for a few moments. Harris stood frozen, as if weighing his next move, the tension between him and Keanu palpable. The seconds seemed to stretch, and every detail of the scene, the quiet restaurant, the hum of voices in the background, the soft clinking of plates and silverware, seemed to fade into the distance. All that mattered now was the boy in front of him, the danger hovering just beyond the edge of the table, and the choices that would determine both of their fates. Then, without another word, Harris turned and walked towards the door, his every movement deliberate, like a predator retreating into the shadows. Keanu stayed where he was, watching closely until the door closed behind him with a soft chime. The tension in the room slowly began to dissipate. Keanu turned back to Ethan, who was still standing close to him, clutching the broken toy car. "It's over," Keanu said softly, offering the boy a reassuring smile. "You're safe now." Ethan didn't reply at first. Instead, he simply nodded, his small body relaxing for the first time since he'd come up to Keanu. The boy's hand, still clutching the car, loosened just a little, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. Keanu leaned in closer, making sure Ethan knew he was there for him. "You did great, Ethan. You're very brave." The boy finally looked up, his eyes wide, filled with gratitude and something else, a quiet sense of relief. "Thank you," he whispered again. Keanu smiled gently. "It's my pleasure." And for a brief moment, in the midst of all the uncertainty and fear, Keanu felt something that was rare in his world, peace. The kind of peace that only comes from doing the right thing. Unwavering, his hand still firmly on Harris's chest. "We're not here to make judgments, sir. We're just here to get to the truth." He turned to his partner, Officer Vega, and gave her a slight nod. Vega gently placed her hand on Ethan's shoulder, giving him a calm smile. "Ethan, you're very brave for speaking up. We're going to make sure you and your mom are okay, all right?" Ethan nodded slightly, his grip on his broken toy car still tight, but the fear in his eyes had softened just a bit. Harris, still trying to regain control, took a step back, his eyes flashing with irritation. "This is absurd. You think I'd hurt my own family? You're wasting your time. There's nothing to see here." Keanu stood his ground, keeping a protective stance next to Ethan. "That's not up to you to decide. The boy has spoken, and now it's time for the truth to come out." At this, Harris's expression turned colder, his eyes narrowing into a glare that could freeze anyone in place. "You really don't know who you're messing with, Reeves," he said, his voice low and menacing. But the words didn't seem to have any power anymore. The police officers were standing firmly in his way, and Harris knew his control over the situation was slipping. "Sir," Ramirez said, his voice stern, "I need you to stay calm and stay here. We have more questions for you." He glanced over to Vega, who was still crouched down beside Ethan, offering him a comforting smile. Ethan looked up at Keanu, his voice shaky but resolute. He said if I told anyone, no one would believe me. That no one would help. Keanu's heart clenched at the boy's words, but he kept his composure. "You did the right thing, Ethan. You're safe now," he whispered, his voice gentle but firm. Harris, clearly agitated now, swiped at his phone and began typing rapidly. "I'm done here," he muttered, eyes darting between the officers and Keanu. "I'm calling my lawyer. You'll regret this." Ramirez shook his head, not backing down. "Until we figure out what's going on here, you're not going anywhere, Mr. Harris. Let's take a seat, and let's get some answers." Harris, with no way out, seemed to stiffen with anger, but then lowered his head in a slow, deliberate movement. "This will be over soon enough. You have no idea what's coming," he muttered under his breath. The officers remained calm and resolute. Vega stood up, offering one final reassuring glance to Ethan. "We're going to find your mom, Ethan. We're going to make sure she's safe. You did the right thing by telling us." The room felt tense, yet there was a sense of resolution that had settled in. The police were here, and Harris no longer had the control he thought he had. Keanu stood tall, his gaze never leaving Harris, but his attention fully on Ethan. Keanu leaned down once more, his tone soft but unwavering. "You're safe now, Ethan. It's going to be okay." Ethan finally relaxed his grip on the toy car, looking up at Keanu with a small, grateful smile. His voice was still shaky, but there was hope in his eyes now. "Thank you." Keanu smiled back, the weight of the situation finally starting to ease. "You're very welcome, Ethan." And in that moment, as the police took control of the situation, Keanu knew that this was a moment he would never forget. The moment when his simple act of kindness made all the difference for a young boy who had no one else to turn to. Sat in the back of the patrol car, seething with anger. His earlier bravado had evaporated, replaced by a sullen, almost calculating quiet. He had no idea how close he had come to losing control of the situation entirely. The officers, now confident in their findings, had clearly shifted the balance of power. Inside the house, the chaos was palpable. Broken furniture, shattered glass, and the unmistakable signs of a violent struggle filled the living room. Ramirez and Vega, their faces grim, scanned the scene as their eyes landed on Sarah. She was unconscious, barely breathing, her head bloody from the cut. Her condition was critical, but the fact that she was alive was a small mercy. Vega immediately signaled to the paramedics, who arrived shortly after. They rushed inside, taking over the scene and starting to stabilize Sarah. Keanu stood at the threshold, his chest tight with emotion. He hadn't known Sarah, but the realization that this woman had been so close to being lost forever hit him hard. All because of Harris's twisted control. The officers had already begun going through the backpack Harris had left behind. Ramirez flipped open the notebook they found inside, scanning the pages quickly. Each line was a chilling revelation of Harris's obsessive and dangerous behavior, meticulously tracking Sarah and Ethan's every move, planning their escape, planning to hurt them both. Harris was planning on taking him, Vega said softly, her face etched with disbelief. This is worse than we thought." Keanu glanced at the paramedics, relieved that they were doing everything they could to stabilize Sarah. But then his attention snapped back to the officers. "How long has he been planning this?" he asked, voice thick with emotion. "Longer than we realized," Ramirez said. "It looks like he was preparing to abduct Ethan in the next few days. Sarah must have found out, tried to stop him, and he responded by hurting her." Keanu's stomach turned. He had only scratched the surface of the horrors Ethan and his mother had been living through. The boy had barely spoken about what had happened, but Keanu had felt the weight of his fear and anxiety. He looked at Ethan now, still sitting in the car, his eyes wide with uncertainty. "We need to make sure he doesn't get away with this," Keanu said firmly. Vega nodded, stepping toward the car. "We're doing everything we can to make sure he doesn't. But I need you to stay with Ethan, okay? He needs you more than anyone right now." Keanu turned back to the boy, his heart heavy but resolute. Ethan looked so small sitting in the back seat, clutching his broken toy car as though it were his last piece of safety. Keanu sat beside him, offering his presence as a shield against the world that had tried to crush this innocent boy's life. "I know this is scary, Ethan," Keanu said softly, his voice steady. "But I'm here. And they're going to take care of your mom. She's going to be okay." Ethan's eyes flickered up at him, the hint of a tear brimming in his eye. "Do you think she'll wake up?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Keanu swallowed, his heart breaking for the boy. "I do. And when she wakes up, she's going to see how strong you were today. You're a hero, Ethan. Do you know that?" The boy gave a tiny, tremulous smile, his fingers loosening their death grip on the toy car. For a brief moment, he seemed to believe it. Outside, the officers had taken control of the situation. Harris was being driven away, and with the evidence from the notebook, the case against him was ironclad. But there was still a lot to unravel. Harris's words rang in Keanu's mind, his threats and his arrogance, but they were nothing now. He was going down, and Ethan was safe. As the paramedics carefully loaded Sarah into the ambulance, Vega returned to the car. "We've got Sarah stabilized. She's going to be okay. She'll need a lot of care, but she'll make it." Keanu felt the tension ease from his shoulders, though his mind raced. The work wasn't over. They had to get Ethan through this, help him cope with the trauma, help Sarah rebuild her life. But for now, they were moving in the right direction. Keanu gave Ethan one last reassuring smile before turning to the officers. "Let's make sure they both get the help they need. And keep Harris where he belongs." With that, Keanu's resolve solidified even further. He wasn't going to let this family suffer any longer. Not while he had the chance to help. This story is incredibly moving and packed with emotional depth. It paints a vivid picture of human resilience, compassion, and the transformative power of kindness. Keanu's character, portrayed as both a protector and a compassionate figure, stands out in the most powerful way. His involvement goes beyond just protecting Ethan. He also becomes a pillar of support for Sarah, offering them both the safety and care they so desperately needed. His calm, grounded presence, even in the face of danger, shows an unwavering strength that resonates throughout the narrative. What really makes this story so impactful is the portrayal of vulnerability and strength. Ethan, though just a child, shows extraordinary courage in his willingness to seek help and speak out, even when faced with the threat of his abuser. This alone speaks to the importance of support systems and how small acts of bravery can lead to monumental change. It's such a reminder that sometimes, asking for help is the bravest thing a person can do, no matter their age. The symbolic element of the toy car being fixed is deeply touching as well. It represents not just the boy's need for comfort and stability, but also serves as a metaphor for the healing process. Just as the car was broken and needed repair, so too do the lives of the characters, especially Ethan and Sarah. The act of restoring something that was once broken is a beautiful parallel to how they, too, will rebuild their lives with time, care, and support. It's also a subtle, yet powerful, message of hope, reminding us that even the most damaged parts of ourselves or our situations can be healed. Keanu's decision to get involved with a local organization supporting victims of domestic violence adds another layer of depth to the story. It highlights how one person's actions, whether big or small, can lead to positive, far-reaching changes. His involvement shows that, while he was in the right place at the right time, his willingness to continue making a difference long after the immediate crisis has passed is what truly sets him apart. It's a reminder of the ripple effect kindness can have on others. The recognition Ethan receives during the ceremony is such a poignant moment, an acknowledgement of his bravery and strength. The drawing he gives Keanu, with the words "my hero," is such a simple, yet profound gesture. It's heartwarming to see Ethan, who was once so afraid and uncertain, now finding a sense of safety and hope through the help of Keanu and the officers. The innocence and purity behind that drawing emphasize just how transformative kindness can be, especially for someone so young who's been through so much. In all, this story is not just about the heroism of one person, but about the collective effort of individuals coming together to help one another. It's about finding strength in vulnerability and how seeking help can lead to profound healing. This kind of story, full of hope, courage, and compassion, is definitely one I'd want to read more of. It serves as a reminder that no matter how dark a situation may seem, there's always the potential for light, especially when people step up to support each other.